Something inside your mind feels fundamentally altered. Maybe it happened this morning, or maybe it started years ago. You believe you understand your own thoughts, your choices, and your personality. You are entirely wrong. Your mind is currently running an invisible operating system that you did not choose. It dictates exactly how you see, feel, panic, and survive. Most people think mental disorders are rare flaws that happen to someone else. The latest neurological data reveals a far more unsettling truth. You might already be actively living within one of these architectural loops without even realizing it. Today, I will tell you everything in one single video. This is every major mental disorder, exactly what they do to your brain structure, and how they are actively shaping who you are. Depression. Mainstream culture tells you this condition is simply feeling very sad because of a bad day. Stop. That is completely incorrect. Sadness is an emotion. Major depressive disorder is a structural lockout of the human brain. It begins with a total loss of internal color. Your limbs suddenly feel like solid lead. Moving from your bed requires absolute, agonizing physical effort. This is because your brain is undergoing a severe downregulation of its neural pathways. The brain becomes biologically incapable of processing anticipation or pleasure. Your favorite foods taste like dry cardboard. The voices of the people you love sound completely distant, as if they are shouting from underwater. You are not sad, you are entirely empty. This changes how you see yourself. If you have ever experienced an inexplicable week where your motivation vanished and your favorite hobbies felt completely pointless, you weren't being lazy. Your brain's reward infrastructure was actively starved of neurochemical fuel. But if depression is an absolute shutdown of your brain's engine, what happens when the engine runs completely out of control? That brings us to a condition that turns your own survival networks into a weapon against you. Anxiety. You think it is just worrying about a stressful tomorrow or overthinking an upcoming job interview. It is not. Generalized anxiety disorder is an active, unprovoked physical assault on your nervous system. Your heart rate skyrockets while you are sitting completely still in an empty room. Your lungs refuse to take in a full breath. Your mind desperately scans the room for a threat that does not exist. Here is the counterintuitive truth. Your brain is trying to save your life, but its calibration is entirely broken. Your amygdala has entered a state of permanent hyperdrive. It continuously floods your bloodstream with cortisol and adrenaline. It cannot distinguish between a deadly predatory animal and an unread text message from your boss. You may already be experiencing this. Every time you feel a random, sudden knot in your stomach for no apparent reason, it is your brain preparing your body for a physical war that never arrives, leaving you permanently spent. But what happens when this constant undercurrent of dread concentrates into highly specific, terrifying mental loops? The next condition takes this fear and locks it inside a cage of inescapable rituals. OCD. Mainstream media jokes about this disorder. They tell you it means you simply love clean desks, organized closets, and symmetry. Wait, that is a dangerous lie. Obsessive-compulsive disorder is not a quirk, it is a brutal psychological prison. Imagine an intrusive, horrific thought slamming into your brain completely uninvited, like the vivid image of your house burning down because you left the stove on. You know you turned it off. You checked it twice, but a voice inside your head whispers that your family will perish unless you walk over and toggle the switch exactly 4 times. You execute the physical ritual, the anxiety drops for 1 single second, then the loop immediately resets. Neuroscientists discovered that OCD is a severe structural glitch in the brain's habit-tracking networks. The neural circuit responsible for signaling that a task is safely completed fails to fire. Your own logic becomes completely useless against your neurochemistry. Most people never realize this. We all have minor rituals to feel safe, but when the brain's internal completion switch breaks entirely, your life becomes dictated by numbers and invisible laws. If a broken circuit can trap a mind in the present, what happens when an old historic terror refuses to stay in the past? The next disorder entirely shatters your brain's concept of time. PTSD. Most assume this condition only occurs on a battlefield, but trauma does not care about geography. A sudden loud pop, a specific smell, or a passing shadow instantly hijacks the present moment. The individual is not just remembering a bad event, they are physically reliving it. Post-traumatic stress disorder physically alters the structure of your hippocampus, the region responsible for organizing and dating your memories. Because the hippocampus is chemically impaired by trauma, the brain cannot categorize the horrific event as something that belongs to the past. To your nervous system, the danger is still actively occurring right now. This may explain your behavior during moments when you completely overreact to a minor conflict or a sudden change in your environment. Your brain is utilizing an old defense blueprint because it thinks the threat is still in the room. You are living in a house where the burglar alarm can never be turned off. Most people watching this believe their mind is completely immune to these structural distortions. You believe your identity is a solid, unshakable stone. But here is the unsettling truth. The conditions we have looked at so far merely alter your moods and memories. The next condition on our list completely rewires how a person constructs their entire reality and self-conception. Bipolar disorder. It is frequently oversimplified by public discourse as simple mood swings, being happy one hour and irritable the next. It is far more extreme. It is a violent, large-scale oscillation between two entirely different human states. During a manic phase, the brain's frontal lobes lose their inhibitory control, flooding the entire system with massive, unnatural surges of dopamine. You feel entirely invincible. You do not sleep for days, yet you possess boundless energy. You execute grand, highly dangerous financial or personal plans because your brain has completely disabled its risk assessment software. Then, without a single warning sign, the neurochemical supply line vanishes completely. The mind crashes into a devastating, paralyzing state of clinical depression. This changes how you see yourself. Human identity relies on predictability. When your internal biology swings violently from godlike confidence to complete despair, your very sense of self becomes a hostage to your neurochemistry. But while a bipolar brain swings between emotional extremes, our next condition causes the entire sensory world to fracture into completely terrifying illusions. Schizophrenia. This represents the ultimate structural breakdown of cognitive boundaries. The brain begins to perceive sounds, voices, and patterns that possess absolutely no physical reality. Many assume this is just an overactive imagination. It is not. Neuroimaging has documented that during auditory hallucinations, a patient's auditory cortex is just as active as it would be if a real person were standing next to them speaking aloud. The brain is not inventing thoughts, it is genuinely processing phantom signals as external facts. The internal filtering that separates your internal monologue from external stimuli has completely shattered. Most people never realize this. Your reality is only real because your brain actively filters out millions of random neural misfires every second. When that filter degrades, the world becomes an inescapable, shifting maze. If a broken filter can distort the entire physical room, what happens when a subtle neurochemical deficiency makes it impossible to focus on a single object within that room? ADHD. Society frequently brands this condition as a simple lack of willpower, a modern excuse for laziness or a childhood phase. That assumption is biologically flat wrong. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is a fundamental structural deficiency in the brain's executive control center, the prefrontal cortex. In an ADHD brain, basic dopamine levels are naturally too low. This means the brain resides in a constant state of chemical starvation for stimulation. Focusing on a mundane task like reading a textbook or completing paperwork feels like trying to read a book while standing inside a roaring, chaotic crowd. Your mind constantly jumps from one stimulus to another, desperately searching for the neural fuel it requires to operate. This affects decisions you make today. If you constantly find yourself scrolling on your phone while watching a video or abandoning projects halfway through, your brain is actively hunting for dopamine microdoses to keep its executive center alive. It is a powerful engine running at maximum speed, but with a broken steering wheel. Borderline personality disorder. Imagine living your life entirely without an emotional thermostat. A minor, accidental shift in a friend's facial expression or a slightly delayed response to a text message triggers an immediate, catastrophic wave of psychological pain. To the outside world, the reaction looks completely irrational. To the individual, it is an absolute emergency. In a brain with BPD, the hyper-reactive limbic system completely overrides the rational prefrontal cortex. The neurological capacity to regulate emotional responses is severely compromised. The brain treats any potential threat of abandonment as a total life-or-death survival scenario. You may already be experiencing this in your own relationships if you find yourself deeply loving someone one day and completely detaching the next out of an intense, unconscious fear of being hurt first. Your emotional skin is entirely gone, making the ordinary world feel profoundly dangerous to touch. Anorexia nervosa. Many dismiss this condition as superficial vanity, extreme dieting, or an obsession with matching cultural beauty standards. It is a lethal cognitive distortion. The brain's internal map of the physical body has become entirely warped. When an individual with anorexia looks in a mirror, they do not see what you see. Neuroimaging shows severe alterations in the parietal lobe, the area responsible for spatial processing and the internal body schema. The individual's visual processing centers are actively generating an incorrect image of an oversized body. Starvation becomes a desperate neurological mechanism to regain a sense of absolute safety and control over an overwhelming environment. Most people never realize this. It has the highest mortality rate of any psychiatric disorder. It is a brutal, structural war waged by the mind against the very biological body it occupies. Dissociative Identity Disorder. This represents the brain's ultimate desperate survival defense system. When overwhelming, horrific trauma occurs in early childhood before the personality has fully formed, the developing mind cannot integrate its experiences into a single, cohesive identity. To preserve baseline sanity and save the child's life, the mind builds thick, impenetrable walls. It partitions memories, behaviors, and core traits into separate, distinct states of consciousness. Each personality takes complete control of the physical body at different intervals, often leaving the others with massive, terrifying gaps in time and memory. This changes how you see human consciousness. The mind breaks its own mirror into distinct pieces so that the whole self can survive the blast. Social Anxiety Disorder. People frequently label this condition as standard shyness, being a quiet person, or simply being an introvert. It is not. It is an intense, paralyzing phobia of human evaluation. Your throat constricts completely. Your mind goes entirely blank. You become hyper-aware of every single micro-movement of your own body, absolutely convinced that any minor mistake will result in total social ruin. This may explain your behavior if you have ever skipped a gathering or avoided making a necessary phone call until your heart was pounding against your ribs. Your brain interprets social spaces not as opportunities for connection, but as hot zones filled with physical danger. The neurological pathways responsible for monitoring social status trigger a severe trauma response over ordinary human interactions, making isolation the only place where your nervous system can finally breathe. Panic disorder. This is the sudden, catastrophic climax of neurological panic. Without a single external trigger or warning sign, a wave of pure terror floods your entire body. Your chest experiences sharp, blinding pain. Your lungs completely refuse to expand. You are entirely convinced that you are having a fatal heart attack or losing your sanity permanently. Here is the shocking connection. Your body is completely fine. This is a severe physical false alarm generated deep within the brainstem. Your automated nervous system suddenly fires its maximum survival emergency response for absolutely no reason, mimicking the exact sensations of impending death. The episode passes within minutes, but it leaves behind a deep, lingering trauma. This changes how you make decisions. You begin to fear the panic itself, avoiding public spaces, driving, or open areas, trapping your mind in a continuous cycle of anticipating the next internal explosion. When you look at these 12 conditions together, the human mind can feel like an incredibly fragile, terrifying landscape. It feels as though we are all just one broken circuit or one neurochemical drop away from losing reality entirely. But here is the deepest, most transformative reframe. A mental disorder is not a personal character flaw. It is not evidence that you are fundamentally broken, defective, or weak. It is a highly complex, beautifully evolved nervous system doing its absolute best to survive an overwhelming world using the limited tools it possesses. Your brain learns specific structural patterns to protect you from pain, stress, or trauma at a critical point in your life. And any pattern that was learned by the brain can always be slowly, systematically unlearned through neuroplasticity. Your architecture is not a life sentence. The mind can always find its way back home. If our brains can develop these complex survival loops to protect us from the external world, what happens when the brain decides to completely trick us about our own physical health? There is a dark category of psychological anomalies where the mind creates real physical sickness out of pure thought, and where your sleep architecture can completely trap you inside your worst nightmares. If you want to understand the hidden mechanics of how your brain manufactures physical illusions every single night, you need to look at what happens when the mind's internal safety switches fail entirely. But that is a mystery for the very next video. Neurological